uh, Japan. So yes, I think that's one of the things we have in common. We are registered in Australia and Philippines, and we're a feminist fund that supports rapid response grant making. And I think last year is when we were working quite closely together, supporting our partners in Afghanistan.
That's right. But share a bit more about yourself, very personal, your personal story.
Yeah, I guess that in terms of co-leadership, I'm a little bit more matured now. I'm now into my second co-partnership. I delved into co-leadership in 2017 with Mary Jane Rial, who was my co-lead at Urgent Action Fund. She left us at about in 2020, and last year I was involved in the process of recruiting our new co-lead, and her name is Vinita, and she's based in India. And yeah, so I think that I've been in co-leadership for a while now, and I feel like I'm now getting used to it. What about you?
My journey to become a co-leader, I started when I was young, I think as a little girl, I always saw how my parents related to each other. So I could see my mom was the planner, my dad was the strategist, my mom was the planner and the strategist. My dad was the executor. My mom could implement nothing, but my dad was the implementer. And then that kind of shifted when I was in school, and the values and lessons of caring for people, putting myself in other people's shoes, understanding perspectives, etc. So, and then I went to school and assumed a few leadership positions, Girl Scouts, Ranger Society, and then moving on to, I was then in a corporate environment for about 20 years and assumed, in a very male-dominant sector in the organization. And then, I think God answered my call and introduced me to Musawah. I joined Musawah in October 2020. So still fairly new to the feminist movement, but I think I've been feminist at heart since young. I went to an all-girls school for 11 years as well. So, but when I joined Musawah, I joined as the Chief Operating Officer under the great Zaina Anwar, the audacious Sisters in Islam and Musawah former ED. I've been quietly admiring since my early 20s. And I think from there, the board then decided, no, I think there was recognition that it was perhaps too much for one person to assume both the activism as well as the operational organizational management in itself. So, and then the co-leadership model came in, and I will share with you my journey compared to yours. Still very young, still very at its infancy, but there's been quite a few good lessons learned, I hope to share with everyone today. And so say a bit more perhaps about your journey to co-leadership.
Yeah, I mean, I used to be for many years the executive director of the Fiji Women's Rights Movement. I was, at the head of a cutting-edge feminist organization in Fiji for 14 years, and I found it, while it was had a lot of there was a lot of things that in that role, and I really enjoyed it. I also found it to be very, very lonely. I found it really lonely. I found it lonely because I felt that, like you rightly pointed out, you end up carrying all the responsibilities of the organization on your shoulders. And in some ways, I think as a feminist, in reflection, when I left, and I was doing some consultancy work, and I was thinking about my time at the Fiji Women's Rights Movement. And, you know, one of the things I thought to myself is that, as you know, sometimes, and I'm just speaking from my own experience, you know, we try to be everything to everybody, right? And I felt in reflection that, you know, sometimes we are actually setting ourselves up for failure, because nobody can be everything to everybody. I think that that's just an impossible task. So when the opportunity came to be part of another organization, and I was approached, the only way that I would consider it if I was going to do it with somebody else, and that person was Mary Jane Rial. And I think we were both very willing to go into this partnership together, because we already had a previous relationship, and we were friends, and we'd been friends and collaborators and conspirers for many years before we even became co-leads. So I think that, and it's a concept that the former co-executive directors of FRIDA came up with, which I absolutely love. Ruby and Devi came up with this concept called friendship as a feminist. I think that's actually the foundation of our co-leadership journey, was that it was built on the strategy of feminist friendship. So for me, what made it feminist was the fact that it is about co-sharing, power sharing. It's about well-being, and it's also about the opportunity to collaborate, conspire, and co-dream together with a friend towards a common feminist vision. What about you? How do you see it?
So when I joined Musawah, I joined as the COO, right? Reporting to the former ED, the founding ED at the time. And I think the realization came about that actually, number one, it creates unnecessary additional hierarchy in the organization. Number two, at the end of the day, we have to strengthen activism, you know, the act of going out and fighting for space, rights, and voice out there, with the strengthening of the secretariat or the core or the operations or the running of it. And because, you know, we're fighting patriarchal forces, that we lose sight over meticulous details and planning and management and ensuring the best running of our organizations, right? Contrast that with corporate sectors who invest so much in processes, structures, and procedures, because they don't really have to justify themselves across the aisle or to everyone else. So they're very focused in terms of delivering the target. So I think that understanding for an organization such as civil societies, for example, when the cause is so big and the arguments against so loud, that strengthening of the core within makes perfect sense to me. And that realization, again, by the board, and I have to credit the Musawah board, because it really came down very strongly from the top, because co-leadership as a model, you know, wasn't really popular. You know, there were concerns about it. You know, can women, you know, the stereotype of can two women really come together and work alongside each other? But I think that realization that, like you said, not one person can possibly embody that strength and power of both facets has led to the co-creation of the model. And the strategy of wielding capitalism weapons such as processes, structures, you know, to power and strengthen Musawah in order to counter the systems of injustice and inequality. I think that was a great vision. Huda Jawad is my other, my sister, so the other co-director of Musawah, and we've been in this journey since August. So it's less than a year still, and we're still finding ground. And I think that makes co-leadership particularly transformational.
Yeah, I love you the way you framed it. I mean, the other interesting thing that you just said there, and I'm keen to hear a little bit more about it, because we do it the way, I mean, Vinita and I's journey is a little bit different. Is that, and this is also something that I learned from my first journey with co-leadership. When Jane and I first entered into co-leadership, we were very clear about our roles. I wanted to do resource mobilization and strategic partnerships. I wasn't really keen on doing programming. She was excited, like that, you know, got her rocks off, was around grant making and programming. And so for the two of us, it was like the two worlds were apart, and it was like we were both getting to have our own candy stores. But at the same time, there was like a corridor in between, which is basically governance. You know, there were some things that were called human resources that we shared as co-leads. And, you know, when you're building an organization, that strategy works really well. But once you start to, you know, kind of consolidate your work, and you're trying to move from building into consolidation, that siloed strategy no longer can be effective, because actually you can end up creating two separate organizations, which I have to admit that did happen to us for a while, two separate organizations that are doing two different things, and it can create a lot of tension. And that was one of the things that, you know, that I learned, and the organization learned as part of our, you know, as part of our learning. And so in terms of, you know, moving into the new strategic plan and with a new co-lead, we were very clear that these siloed ways of working wasn't feasible for the journey, that the next phase of the journey. So while our roles say that I'm strategic partnerships and resource mobilization, and Vinita's programming and innovation, we actually work in a lot more consolidated and collaborative way now that that encourages collaboration. So is that how it's happening there in Musawah right now? Or yeah, I'm keen to hear that, because I heard it differently.
So our skill sets are different. And I do want to get, that's a good segue into what makes co-leadership particularly feminist and transformational, Viri. And I will come back to that again, because an organization is successful as a collective, right? As a team. So a team that is, you know, clearly empowered, engaged, enabled with the right tools, practices, that is technically a recipe for success. And a co-leadership model strengthens that. So with Huda and myself, you know, coming into the role, yes, you know, we had, you know, the delineation of roles. Okay, this one you do, this one I do. My strength is here, your strength is there. You take this, you take that, and then this is where our shared roles are. And you know what? We're still developing it. And I think because the co-leadership model isn't a clear-cut single point accountable, I'm going to use an 80s reference. I'm Shira, you know, princess of the universe. I know I have all the answers, you know, but because we don't, because it's dynamic, because it's a very fluid state, the co-leadership model automatically breaks the fallacy that one person has the answers from the onset. It also means sharing vulnerabilities. It also means us saying, this is what I like you said, like in your experience, these are my strengths, I'm weak in this, I need to learn that. It creates a very different context in terms of power sharing, leadership, vulnerability, also managing, or rather almost diluting the power distance with the rest of the organization, because the rest of the organization sees, oh, they're also trying to see what they can do better, just like the rest of us. So, you know, quoting Brene Brown, from vulnerability comes humility, and then from there, it births creativity and authenticity, which is, I think, great still for the organization, but it also becomes a role model of collaboration with the rest of the team. I'm curious though, Viri, how does the rest of the organization view your co-leadership? The co-leadership model for UAF?
I think one way to describe it in the beginning is that bit schizophrenic in the sense that
yeah,
it's like, I remember one feedback from a team member was, you tell me to do something, and then when I talk to James, she says to do something else. Like, what am I supposed to, what am I supposed to do? And that was a real wake-up call, So one of the things that we had to be clear about is, okay, while we are co-leaders, there are certain things that you're accountable to Viri, and there's certain things you're accountable to Vinita. Their theory should be informed on, but the accountability sits with Vinita, for example. So we had to be very clear about those lines of communication and lines of like who's supervising you, who are you accountable to. We had to be very clear about that. And to be honest, I mean, we're an organization that's been around now for 4 years. We only started to get to that point like this year. Like it was only this year that we started to get to that point. And I think a lot of it had to affect Vinita as a new co-lead, saw some of the gaps, started to identify in place some of these processes, or she identified the processes and we rolled with it, and I think that that's for me that I found that really, really useful, and recognizing that this model, I don't even want to call it model, it's an approach, really, it's approach, right? Because model makes it sound like it's static, it doesn't change.
Yeah,
and that's
correct.
The thing. Yeah, the thing about co-leadership is that it's dynamic, it's contextual, it's dependent on the people that are involved in that relationship. And maybe you can talk to us a little bit about your coach, because I think that's the other thing too that the two of us do. That as co-leaders, we both have coaches.
Yeah, no, that's true. So I still remember, and again, I go back to the board because it was our board members who actually connected us. Nana. So and when we spoke to you and we asked you, what is the one thing? Help us, Viri, we're struggling, we're trying to find our feet. What is the one thing we need to do? And you told us to get a coach early on. So we engaged an organizational development consultant based in Malaysia, Sana George, and I have to say that the sessions allowed us to kind of peel the onion a little bit. So Huda and I are very different in terms of personalities and character. Huda is very outgoing, very feminist, activist out there. She can manage the media. She's all about external engagements. I'm very much spreadsheets, and my staff will laugh at that. They will know this. Processes, structure, things need to be in place. Where are we going? Are we meeting our targets, our impact, et cetera, et cetera? And of course, it came to a clash. And we were like, and Huda is terrified of spreadsheets and like shared drive and folders and that sort of thing. But I could never write a solidarity statement as powerful and as impactful as her. So the clash happened, and the coach allowed us to peel the onion to understand where we were coming from. So what we found was, whilst we appeared to be vastly different, we were actually one and the same.
Sorry, Zharin. Sorry, you've just been muted by mistake.
Unmute.
Sorry. Where did you lose me? Or where did I?
Coach, vastly different. You said a coach, we found out we're vastly different.
Vastly different. Right,
but
sorry.
actually the same.
So, right, so vastly different, but actually the same. And that sameness was really the Musawah value. So what we wanted to, fight and strive for the same thing. And to be honest, being two young female Muslim feminists stepping into the large shoes of our founding ED, we basically didn't want to F it up, We didn't, and that was like, oh my gosh, I feel the same too. Okay, let's work together. So that galvanized the intent, our intent.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, when we only started doing coaching, Jane's last 6 months, and I was kicking myself. I was like, and actually Devi, who's used to be the co-executive director of Frida, she sits on my board, and one of the first things she recommended was get yourself a coach. And we were like, because, okay, I have to be honest, we're like, hello, we've been leaders before. I can do this on my own. I don't need someone to coach me. And like now I want to kick myself. I just really want to kick myself, because if I'd done the coaching earlier, a lot of the things that I knew in the last 6 months of Jane and I's co-leadership would have made it a lot, I don't say easy or anything, it would be a lot more different. And one of the things I recognized is that, the traits and characteristics that makes you an exception on your own aren't necessarily the same kind of skills that you need as a co-leader.
No.
Right. So for me, I found that when I used to be on my own, I'd have these big ideas, our team, and really I wasn't actually accountable to anybody except my board, right? Whereas in a position, you have these as and I shared with Jane, and Jane would be like, okay, how is that going to go? Because she's a lot more pragmatic than me. And the analogy I used to like to use is that I'm like the kite that flies up in the air, and she's like the person holding the kite and kind of grounding it, right? And and one of the things I realized, was that we have very different ways of approaching leadership individually. And as a co-leadership, that's almost like a third personality. So like the strengths of the one co-leading, the strengths of you is another thing, and then the strength of your leadership is something, is also a different thing. And the three, in a way, the way our coach described it is, you've got to see co-leadership as three people in a relationship. Your co-lead, and the co-leadership that you two are trying to build, sustain, and so I found that to be like light bulb moment for me. I was like, oh my God, that is so true. It's my whole perspective. Yeah.
You know what resonated with me when you said that, Viri, is, I guess conventional leadership, when it's just one person, that leadership is a model. It's fixed, it's rigid, it's set in stone. The co-leadership approach is dynamic, and it's constantly dynamic, because you have two people who are each other's mirrors, are each other's check and balance, and as a result, the need to discuss, to converse, to align, to realign, puts the leadership or the thought leadership at the prefrontal cortex at all times. So it's not always on automatic pilot. Yeah, what I say goes, et cetera, et cetera. So you're constantly checking and ensuring that state of equilibrium the three of you, or three of us, the individual co-leaders and the shared leadership. So that's, and I think that doesn't work just for work related, the activism that we do. It's also for wellness. So Huda and myself, I find quite naturally is the check-in with each other. Hey, how you doing? So that wellness approach also comes in, that collective care also it's also very, very clear. Is that the same for you?
Yeah, it is. And I think that for me, one of the things is, and it would be like what the one thing, if I would want to share with everybody, is that for me, the co-leadership approach is really about practicing how you want change to happen, right? Like for you to be part of that relationship or that approach, you're constantly having to negotiate some fixed ideas. You have to negotiate your like you're constantly in, and you're constantly having to look and see how change about yourself, if it's not good, to try and improve that that partnership towards moving closer towards that feminist vision that you have. So for me, what I like about that is that it's like, and it's what we've been saying, right? It's about modeling the change that we want to see in the world, right? And and that co-leadership model is, to me, like is like that action that is happening. You know, the questioning, the mirroring, the collaboration. So that process also changes you. It also changes you. And it made me realize, to me, one of the things that I realized is that what I've learned in my 4 years of co-leadership, I've learned more about myself than I have in my whole 14 years when I was heading an organization on my own. Wow. I know more about myself. I understand myself better because I am in co-leadership with somebody. So the personal growth is is exponential. That's for me, it's like one of the things that I would always promote about co-leadership. What about you? What would be your one takeaway?
Yeah, so I guess my one takeaway, so far we've been talking real positive stuff, and I'm sure the audience are thinking, where's the other side of the coin, right? I think my biggest takeaway on this co-leadership model is that you need, and this I am quoting again from my coach, our coach, right, Susanna George, and you need to have, and I'm probably quoting it wrong, but you need to have the intention from the start and the attention to make it work, basically to the details of making it work. And you can't, so if anybody says, oh, you know, we've listened to this talk by Zharin and Viri and co-leadership model, yeah, it's going to work. No, it's not, right? Like any approach, for example, it is about making that intention understand and clear between the two of you and the rest, and also the rest of the organization. It doesn't just take two people to make the co-leadership work. It takes the entire organization, including the board, to make co-leadership work. So yes, so intention and attention. Right.
Feminist.
Sorry?
Right. The intention, being intentional is actually very feminist, right? Like I always think about feminism as being something is intentional. You have to be and pay attention, as you said.
Yeah, it's true. Right. Shall we bring?
Should we call Brown?
Yeah, let's do that.
Thank you.